President spending his days between the White House and the campaign trail as he makes a push to widen his winning coalition of voters. He's also raising a whole lot of cash. This week, the campaign brought in more than $26 million at a single New York City fundraiser with former Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. The Biden campaign released new video from the event, the president framing what is at stake this November.
We're at a real inflection point in history. Things are changing. This guy denies there's a global warming. This guy wants to get rid of not only Roe v. Wade, but which he brags about having done. He wants to get rid of the ability of anyone anywhere in America to ever choose. I mean, all the things he's doing are so old. Speaking of old. And, you know, a little old and out of shape. But anyway.
And the man has jokes. Joining us now, Biden-Harris Principal Deputy Campaign Manager Quinton Fulks.
Quinton, good to see you. You know, you guys have this huge event, right? You have the three Democratic presidents on stage together with Stephen Colbert, Mindy Kaling's there, all of those things. And I'm curious, you know, when I talk to Republicans, the thing they say is the chasm between how much money you guys are making all the time and how much Donald Trump and folks are going to be able to make and have been making is huge. And they aren't sure that they can actually bridge that gap. So as you guys are getting this money, talk, I guess, about, you know, what that opens up for you. Because I don't know that everyone understands just how wild $25 million is for one event. Some of the Trump folks say they have an event in a couple of days that they're going to do $33 million. We'll see if that actually pans out for them.
Yeah, we'll let them decide on that. But look, what we did the other night was unprecedented. In a single night alone, we raised $5 million more than Donald Trump raised the entire month of February. And it's really important because it's another sign to me that our coalition is mobilizing, they're energized, and they're coming home to support President Biden in this election to make sure Donald Trump doesn't get the White House. And what it allows us to do is to hire staff. Open field offices. We've opened 100 offices in the month of March. We've got staff in every single one of our battleground states. We're communicating with voters directly. The president, the vice president, the first lady, the second gentleman, they're all out on the road taking the case directly to American voters. We've got yard signs, literature, billboards. We are running a campaign, and it takes resources to run a campaign and set up this infrastructure, and you need time. And Donald Trump does not have either. He is running out of time. He's not consolidating his base. He is strapped for cash. The RNC is in shambles. In juxtaposition to us, we are pulling off fundraisers like this. We have our president traveling, talking to voters directly. And so I'm really excited about what these resources allow our campaign to do and very proud. And then the other piece of that is that grassroots supporters are making up a large portion of this. These are people who are giving less than $200. People, 1.3 million donors have contributed to this campaign, 97% giving less than $200. And so that's a really, really big thing for us, and we're incredibly proud of it.
Quinton, the other night was in the words of Bernie Sanders, huge, no doubt. It was a big night, not just for the president and Democrats, but I think within the political environment, a lot of folks, I know on the Republican side also, was like, damn, I wish we could have done that. But the other side of that wonderful night is, I think, an important work that is kind of either not being addressed, and maybe you can clarify that it is. We have my buddy Jonathan Martin of Political Reporting last Friday, quote, "It has been well over 2 months since Chris Christie jumped out of the Republican presidential primary. How has Biden not called Christie? It's political malpractice, and Christie isn't the only anti-Trump Republican or independent waiting for their phone to ring." I could not, Quinton, emphasize anymore the importance of that one piece of data point. What are the campaign's efforts to get the president in communication? And I'll say maybe it is, and we just don't know. It's not being public yet. But do you think that's going to be an important part, or should be an important part of this effort as well, is raising all that cash? Is having the reinforcement of Republicans and independents out there, like a Chris Christie, a Liz Cheney, a Mitt Romney, even if they don't absolutely endorse, but at least give the wink and a nod to say, hey, this guy over here who stands for democracy is better than the one who wants to be a dictator.
Look, it's really important, and our campaign's been focused on these voters and focused on communicating to folks that, Trump has told that he does not want in the Republican Party, that he does not want. They're not extreme enough for him. And these are people who have been showing up. These are voters who in the primary season when Chris Christie and Nikki Haley were running against Donald Trump, they sent a powerful message to Trump that they don't stand for his brand of politics. And we've been focused on making sure that they know they have a place in the Biden campaign and under the Biden administration. Since day one, the president has been a president for all Americans. You are not met with retribution threats when you disagree with President Biden. You are met with listening and understanding, and that's a really big contrast point. The resources that we're going to continue to raise is going to allow us to communicate with these voters. We just released an ad talking to these voters directly, and we're going to continue to double down and make sure that they know they have a place. But these voters have stood up to Trump in 2020. They've stood up again against the things that the MAGA Republican Party wants to do in 2022, 2023, in states like Georgia that I'm very familiar with, and also very powerful of these voters who can come across the aisle and send a strong message. I saw it with my work with Senator Warnock, and same thing in Georgia. We saw 78,000 voters cast a vote for Nikki Haley. This is a direct message to Donald Trump and the MAGA party that these voters won't stand for this, and we're going to continue to do everything we can to court them.
So quick follow-up on that, Quentin. My point isn't the voters. I'm talking about the people who can bring those voters. And that's the piece here that Jonathan Martin in his political piece was making. Someone like a Chris Christie and a Nikki Haley and others who have the direct connection to those voters that your campaign and Joe Biden do not have. How are you looking to position those individuals first by having the president make that outreach? Because publicly, that's a big deal in this environment. I don't care how you cut it, my friend. It's a big deal if the White House or the campaign can say this particular conversation has taken place.
Well, look, I think that we'll have those conversations down the line as we move forward and consider it. But again, our focus is on voters, and these voters know Chris Christie is one vote. I understand your point that Chris Christie can maybe mobilize these voters. But at the end of the day, we're going to continue to do exactly what we've been doing and talk to these voters who have stood up. They've done it, and I think, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley are going to be important factors. Liz Cheney to move some of these voters, and we'll definitely take a look at that as we move further along the election cycle.
Quentin, I'm sure you saw the image that the former president shared on his Truth Social. Your boss, the President of the United States, bound and gagged, Trump 2024 emblazoned on the back of the pickup truck that was carrying him away. What does the campaign do and say in the face of escalating rhetoric against your candidate and the President of the United States?
We continue to make sure that people see it. Unfortunately, I wish that wasn't the case. I wish we didn't have to do that, but it's not surprising. It's not surprising that Donald Trump would share an image like this because this is his brand of politics. This is his vision of America. And at every turn, we've seen what he's been willing to do. He says that there'll be a bloodbath if he is not reelected. He says that the insurrectionists that stormed the Capitol and attacked police officers under his direction on January 6th are hostages and that he will pardon them. He says that he's going to be a dictator on day one. It's not a surprise. It's him telling the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. This is who Donald Trump is, and this is the contrast and exactly what's at stake in this election with the two fundamentally different views of what America is going to be. And Donald Trump continues at every turn to show exactly who he is, and our campaign is going to approach it by making sure that voters see it. They know that he wants there to be violence in America. He is not looking for peace. He is not looking for freedom. He is looking for violence. He is looking for revenge, and he's looking for retribution.
Quentin, before we let you go, this is going to be the longest general election in history, right? We are deep into it, even though the nomination contest.
Look at Quentin's face. He's like, who are you telling?
I know.
Quentin's already like, dude, you see me aging over here?
It's been a year already for me.
So I'm curious how you guys deal with that voter apathy, right? Because we're already seeing that within the Democratic base, right? We're not just like older black voters, which is the real base and foundation of the Democratic Party, but younger voters and more progressive voters who already feel a kind of way negatively about President Biden. And so how do you deal with that apathy when we're going to be talking about this nonstop and they're going to be hearing about it nonstop this entire time?
Look, one, we have to communicate with these voters, and we've made it a priority to communicate with voters all across the board, young voters, old voters, Black, Latino, AAPI. We have made a direct outreach to these voters in all of the states, and we are setting up campaigns to do it. But look, I'm a big, big believer in the fact that you can't have campaigns without joy. And one of the things that I think we can fall into a trap with is that of all the terrible things about Donald Trump and everything that Donald Trump wants to do, the one thing that we all have in this is something that we deeply care about. And we have to have joy in this campaign. We have to communicate with people about the positive things that have been done. We have to communicate about the record low unemployment. We have to communicate about the fact that people aren't paying thousands of dollars for insulin anymore because President Biden capped it. And we have to say that it's because of people who have showed up. And that, at the end of the day, politics is a what have you done for me game. And we have both, right? The president, the vice president got to work saving lives during the pandemic. They got to work lowering costs. They got to work making sure that people had the basic necessities in life. And that's a really big deal when people across the board are coming together. Climate change, gun violence, you name it. There is something that this administration has done for every single constituency group. And we're going to continue to make sure, one, that they know that, but two, that we're actively doing everything we can to bring them in, invite them to events, have conversations with them, because at the end of the day, this campaign is about them. It's not about Joe Biden. It is about American voters, and we trust American voters to stand up to Donald Trump and his brand of politics and make the decision that is going to set America on the right path, because history is watching us. And Americans have not let us down. They voted Donald Trump out in 2020, and Democrats have been continuing to win, and voters across America have been continuing to stand up to this brand of politics because they fundamentally believe in the vision of America that is right and just and where everybody has a chance to succeed and an opportunity to succeed, most importantly, and that's exactly what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris believe.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.